We'll get started. If I could have your attention. Can everyone hear me? Welcome. On behalf of the non-human species, sorry. It's a great pleasure to introduce the Vice President and campaigns leader of People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And I've already introduced Dan Matthews once while he was in jail, so I'll keep this introduction a little bit shorter. At that time, I talked about the importance of struggling on behalf of those who don't have a voice of their own. And I talked about questions of learning how to not be too eager to please everyone, not being too eager to please the powerful in particular, a very hard thing for us at Harvard to learn, because we wouldn't be here if we weren't sufficiently deferential to jump through all the hoops and interviews that, at least for me, made it possible to come to Harvard in the first place. And in that introduction, I quoted the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, who writes of the importance of being ready to go out on a limb, to sometimes offend people or burn bridges. Kierkegaard said, "The person who can endure being alone is poles apart from the social mixer. He is miles apart from the man-pleaser, the one who manages successfully with everyone, he who possesses no sharp edges." And of people who are too much conformists, who are too eager to please everybody who has power in their lives, Kierkegaard wrote, "God never uses such people. Those who will be true to their own vocations, in secular terms we might say true to themselves, cannot avoid the human bite," as Kierkegaard put it. "One must be ready," he wrote, "to be thoroughly misunderstood." And as I mentioned before, I thought that Dan Matthews has the kind of courage to act as an individual who won't always be liked that maybe Kierkegaard had in mind. He's also an extraordinary media strategist, and the tiny little protest in Harvard Square that you see described here on the front of the Crimson of March 2nd, this was first page news in India, in China, in Brazil. It was mentioned on Saturday Night Live, which has a viewership of 30 million or so. It was in electronic and print media across the planet. Not bad for a protest involving 6 or 7 people, and not a terribly big amount of time and almost no expenditure.
You want to show the CNN clip?
Yeah, well, a good point that I should draw this introduction to a close. Please join me in welcoming Dan Matthews.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. I graduated from American University in 1985, and I think this is the first time I've dare set foot back on a college campus since, but it's great to be back, and it's great to meet you all. A lot has happened in the last 20 years. I've been working at PETA for about 19 years, and we didn't always act like idiots. We used to do things in a way that would really focus as much tension as possible on the animal cruelty behind the different issues that we discuss. We have done undercover investigations on fur farms. We have done exposés on animals who bite legs off from leg hole traps, which are trying to desperately escape. It's a real hideous life out there for animals. And what has happened in our world, especially in the last 20 years, it's sort of odd. It used to be that people wanted to be educated. All of you here want to be educated. Most people want to be entertained. That's why we now have the E! Channel and VH1 and 600 TV stations that are just there to entertain people. It's why the internet and all these other deviations so that people can escape the hard realities of life. And we used to do, like I say, with our undercover investigations, it all changed once in the late 80s. I had a meeting at 2020. We were trying to get them to do a story on animal testing. We had some horrible undercover footage. And the producer said to me, you know, just this last month, the rating systems changed. We now no longer know just what programs people are watching, but we know at the exact second at which they changed the channel. And they had just done some story about Mexican rodeos, and when the animals were slammed to the ground and the cruel footage was shown, they lost about 20% of their audience. People didn't want to be upset, and they would turn on and watch something else that was more frivolous. So he said, we're not going to take your new case, but let us know if you've got something that might be a little bit more entertaining for people. So as we are a nonprofit, we don't really have an ad budget. We're not selling a product that we can recoup costs with. We're promoting an idea, a humane idea that animals are just our neighbors on the planet and that we have to learn to be better neighbors. And we know that once people see the footage of how animals suffer, the debate becomes very simple because most people have a good, decent side. But when we stopped getting airtime because everything started becoming more escapist, 2020, which used to do thoughtful exposés, started doing an hour-long on Whitney Houston's drug problem or other trivial things. So to not become invisible, PETA had to sort of change with the times. And so we've devised all these protests that are much more like vaudeville shtick than old-fashioned protests. And it's really, really worked to keep things on the agenda. We never meant to be a popular organization. Our goal was always just to keep in your face and to keep the issues on the public agenda so that people, the first step in any movement is to get issues discussed in the public. And we've been able to do that, and oddly, we've grown. We have 800,000 members now. Whenever we get all these new members, we always think, didn't they just see what we did? But I think people feel good and challenged. They know that we're up against, the industries that we're up against are ruthless and have far more money than we'll ever have. But we have been able to keep relevant. I wanted to show just the video of the protest from 3 weeks ago from CNN, which means I guess I have to figure out how to press a button, which I'm not sure. Oh, cool. And just so you see I wasn't kidding, I really do have Monopoly underwear. That has go directly to jail on the back. So next protest, yeah.
Campaign to Harvard yesterday in typical splashy fashion. Some Harvard students stripped down on campus in the name of protesting fur. Yesterday, they joined People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals in Harvard Square for its international Rather Go Naked Than Wear Fur campaign. The protesters got in a makeshift bed together and held a banner reading, "Fur out, love in."
It was cold in Boston yesterday.
It wasn't that cold. Although that mattress was kind of skanky. I've been itching since then. I don't know about you, Kristen. Anyways, this headline news has a viewership of 425,000. That, in addition to Saturday Night Live and all the other stuff, it really snowballed the message around the world. And in sort of a lighthearted way, it was, not as much of a thoughtful expose as a tramping segment or electrocution on a fur farm would be, but they certainly got the point across. Today we had a protest, and we also invited all the press. We held up posters of a skinned fox, and the slogan on the poster was, "No skin off your back, don't wear fur." And we gave out about 200 leaflets. The press didn't care, except for the Crimson came and took a few pictures. We probably reached about 300 people, and it was good. But the same amount of time, if you're a charity and you really want to have a revolution, we're not doing this because we like it. We're doing this because we want to see things change. You know, sure, taking off our clothes, why not? If that's what'll get them out there. It just means you have to wash your underwear. So one point I wanted to bring up, I didn't realize that there was a counter-protest, but apparently there's a small counter-protest protesting our objectification of women, even though I don't think I am one, last I checked, by using naked people in ads. And maybe that should be the first thing that we discuss, if anybody.
We can go right ahead to Susanna Tobin's question, and then we'll come back to Alex Buell's question. Where's Susanna? Sorry, Asya Trojchansky's question? Yeah, and we'll get back to Susanna as well.
In many of its campaigns, PETA features pornographic images of women, as you just said. In 1991, for example, PETA promoted vegetarianism by hiring Playboy centerfolds to pose in lettuce bikinis. Now, I recognize that sex sells, and that PETA's use of sex is meant chiefly to call attention to the plight of downtrodden animals. But regardless of PETA's noble intent, these images are incredibly demeaning to women. With PETA's strong beliefs in ethics and fair treatment, how do you justify objectifying women to advance animal rights? Where do you draw the line between catching the public's attention and preserving the dignity of women?
Thanks. Well, the first question I'd like to ask, or point I'd like to make, is how is somebody wearing a lettuce bikini pornographic? I don't think they were fucking the lettuce. Okay. I mean, last I knew, okay. I participate in a lot of these naked campaigns. I was in bed with 5 women. I'm a fag. There was nothing pornographic going on there. So I don't understand, you know, I don't understand the sexual obsession. If people see a body, a naked body, or if they only think that that's a sexual tool, I think that points to some odd sexual obsession. I mean, I use my body as a protest tool. I've used my body as lots of other kind of tools too whenever I saw fit. And I think sexuality is just one aspect of humanity. And I think that, you know, everybody out there has different characteristics. Some of you are really funny. Some of you are really smart. Some of you are really good looking. And I think that we all have different attributes in our life. And I think it's really oppressive to tell people, especially women, hey, you know, no, not that one. And, you know, don't be sexual, don't be sexy. And I've known all sorts of different people, and I think that, you know, if you've got brains and that's what your shtick is, great. And you can have more than one thing. But I think declaring something pornographic just because it's naked it's a little puritanical. I don't know. You know, I understand the point, and I've thought of that myself because I have lots of feminist friends. Kathy Najimy, who did one of our, she's done 2 of our Rather Go Naked Than Wear Fur ads. She's she was the nun in Sister Act and Hocus Pocus. She always points out that we don't really objectify women because we use women of all shapes and sizes. The only time there was ever a slightly sexual image, I think, was the one we did with Melissa Etheridge and her girlfriend Julie, because they were in a sort of hugging pose. So, you know, 2 out lesbians. We've spotlighted all types of people in this campaign. We've used men, we've used women, but I don't know that we've ever had anything that was pornographic. I mean, they wouldn't run it in the newspaper if it was. So I hope I've addressed, I understand the sentiment, because you know, I share a lot of the same sentiments, but I think that I just don't see that people shouldn't use their body to make a point. The point here is very direct, because fur is an animal's skin, and the thing we always say is we're showing our own skin. Here's proof that you don't need to wear animal skins. We have our own skin that we can wear that keeps us plenty warm. So it seems to be a direct correlation. So I hope that, you know, answers some questions.
Alex Buell.
Hey, thanks again for coming. Although I have to admit, this is not my verbatim question because I didn't know it was still listed there. But from what I do recall, though, I mean, we've read basically your personal experience with a fishing trip that sort of partly convinced you to become a vegetarian. And I'm wondering if there was a personal experience or a personal individual in your younger life that sort of helped you or convinced you to become such an active sort of contrarian, really, to sort of not just reject sort of what people think of you and face criticism and such, but to actively sort of run against it, almost sort of, some people would say brazenly, but I would say definitely very sort of somewhat courageously, I guess. But I wonder if there's an individual or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. I grew up in Southern California in the late 70s, and I was always, when I grew up, I was fat, I was obnoxious, I used to get beat up all the time, had very few friends, and then fortunately punk rock came along, and I thought, that's my tribe. So sadly, where I grew up at the time in very conservative Orange County, there was only one punk rocker in my school. Her name was Connie Pearson. It hadn't really hit the suburbs yet, but I wanted to look like, I was prepped for brain surgery every day too, just like those other people. So she, we became friends, and she, cut my hair off with a razor blade. I wanted to bleach it white. I didn't even know there was such a thing as hair bleach, so I poured Clorox over my head, which, ended up picking us scabs off in class for a whole week after. But it was exciting because this whole new style, that was coming in. And the attitude, of the original punk rock scene was certainly looking at the world critically and not just going along with everything. And Connie was my biggest influence in that. In 1980, there was a record that came out by Susie and the Banshees called Kaleidoscope, and the last song on it was called Skin. And it was a song that sort of mocked fur wearers. And we thought it was, thrilling to hear a song like that. You never really heard about things like that. And Connie's mother, who was mortified that we looked like we did, she told us that that song Skin was the only song that made any sense, and she was a member of some local animal organization. And we looked at the newsletter, and there was protests. And back then it was pretty much just grandmothers and a few hippies and some housewives, and then Sid and Nancy over here. And, I think our first protest, it was a blind person in a wheelchair with a sign pushed up against her legs, and a few other people, no press or anything. And we just started getting involved, and we started reading about the hideous things that were happening to animals, smog inhalation studies, maternal deprivation studies, things that were just heartbreaking and that you never knew about. And so Connie and I both started getting involved. So I would have to say that she, both for, when I became a punk, I was even at school, the first guy punk rocker in the high school. I really, took, beatings quite a lot, but, persevered. And of course, within a year or two, people were asking me where the cool shows were happening, and sort of, it became a little bit more of a fashionable thing, which is when it got a little dull, I guess. But no, I would say that. And, realizing everybody's an individual, and I think that was one of the great things about the punk movement, which is still endured today, is that it's a, cynical look at a pretty screwed up world. And I think that, there's a lot that can be absorbed from that.
Can everyone hear okay in the back? That's okay. Susanna Tobin.
Hi, thanks for coming. According to an article we read about you, and as you just mentioned, part of your motivation to help in the fight for animal rights stemmed from your having been beaten up as a child and a teenager, and your sense that animals are the victims of bullying by humans. How do you reconcile that motivation with the accusations some might have that you bully people with your activist tactics, whether by throwing paint at women in fur coats, taking over offices, or sending a dead raccoon on a plate to Anna Wintour? Put another way, do you make a distinction between civil disobedience and personal attacks?
Thanks. I think the things like, confronting somebody about their fur coat or about any of those things, those are inconveniences. We have a case now at Columbia University where baboons are having their left eye ripped out, and they're going in and clamping down on the blood vessels to induce stroke in studies that they're not even publishing the reports of because they didn't work the way the drug company wanted them to work. To me, that is extreme. Debeaking chickens without anesthesia, live scalding chickens to defeather them because it's cheaper for KFC. Those things to me are absolute atrocities and terror. Making somebody uncomfortable for a few minutes or a few seconds, to me, really sort of pales in comparison. I think that we've become a society obsessed with convenience and obsessed with having whatever we want because we deserve it. And that's what we're sort of up against. So it's also sort of a uniquely American thing. We blocked the doors and closed down a KFC in Paris last July in a big protest. And the kids that were walking by, they would take the leaflets and say, "They're doing this?" And they join the protest and block the whole street with us. Here they'd say, "Get the hell out of my way, I want my 6-piece bucket." You know, so it's odd. That's what we're sort of up against here. But we are a global organization, and we try to, it's interesting to compare and contrast the different attitudes. But that's what we're up against. People, they don't want to hear these things. And so I actually don't think that we go far enough. I would like to see people made much more uncomfortable, frankly. But thanks.
Lindsay Murray.
Hi, thanks for coming. Your friend Connie Pearson said about you, quote, "He can take any situation, bad as it gets, and make it fun. I don't think I've ever seen him in a bad mood." How did you develop this characteristic, and how has it affected your work at PETA? Can you describe a situation when your good mood worked especially well for you, or when it backfired on you?
Oh, it's probably gotten me into a lot more trouble than not. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just genetic. I don't know. I just always have been able to laugh at everything, even my own, personal trauma. And I think that as I became an activist and as I realized, I'm 39 now, and I started working at PETA when I was 20, but I'd already been a volunteer for years before that. Over the years, I was very disturbed and disappointed to see these great, incredible activists who burned out after 3, 4, 5 years because they could not sustain the rage. Everything was so dire. And I think that, especially when you're part of a movement that's trying to attract people, it's really good to look upbeat and to look like something that people want to be a part of. And that's why I think that CNN thing was so great, because you thought, oh, great, it's a bunch of kids, having a pillow fight in a bed. Why not? I mean, it's just rather than always having this dour grimace, which sort of repels people, especially more nowadays. So I think I just tried to recognize the light side of everything. And, if you're all getting arrested sometime and you're handcuffed behind your back, well, you can still lead the whole crowd in jail in the hokey pokey because they didn't shackle your legs. I mean, there's always, some fun. You can always make fun of things, and I think that's always the best attitude. And it's probably why I haven't burnt out, but still feel as energized. And also, the other thing is, although most of my friends are vegetarian or animal rights sympathizers, I don't only hang around with animal rights people. I have, captain of my bowling team actually has been a rodeo rider, and I'm around all sorts of people, and I don't really judge people if they don't agree with me or if they even think I'm an idiot for the things I do. There's probably some other good reason to hang out with them if they're fun, and so I don't segregate myself off into some, like a lot of gays will only hang out with gay people and go to gay clubs. I like biker bars myself. I just think that it keeps life much more interesting, and it keeps you feel invigorated and refreshed and upbeat by just seeing all the different elements there are in the world, and to have a constant flow of inspiration from people who think differently rather than just sort of walling yourself up. So I hope I answered the question. Sort of? Okay.
Nathan Lang.
Mr. Matthews, thanks for coming back to be with us today. Your critics and those of your organization frequently accuse you of taking your tactics to the extreme and going over the line, as it were, in the process of making a statement about animal rights. And I also recognize that a few minutes ago you said that in some cases you feel like we should be even more extreme in your tactics. So my question for you then is this: when have you felt, for any reason, most apprehensive or uncomfortable about going forward with the campaign, and how did you resolve that conflict within yourself?
Well, we talked a little bit about this last night. I've never done anything that I regretted, even though it's been a close call sometimes. I mean, the basic mindset that we operate from at PETA is that it's an emergency situation. In the time we'll have been here today, there will be primates that have gone into shock and have died due to severe pain and stress here in Harvard's laboratories. Though there's just this horrible secret world of things that are hideous things that are going on. And in our desperation to attract attention to them, we go to some extremes. Sometimes that means, when I was here in Boston before, we were trying to convince Gillette to stop testing on animals, and we actually had undercover footage of them blinding rabbits in their tests. And we couldn't get the company to respond at all, so a friend of mine and I dressed up as janitors and wheeled a TV set into Gillette's headquarters cafeteria and plugged it in and showed it during lunchtime, and it was pandemonium ensued. And we ended up in jail, but it got on the national news, and they aired the footage, and it was one of the steps that led the company to stop. So, yeah, I'm sure we made a few people barf in their cafeteria because they didn't want to see a rabbit getting so. But I don't really think that was going too far. I think that was just, trying to raise awareness. General Motors did animal crash tests. They killed 20,000 animals, hanging dogs and pigs in slings and having hydraulic force hit them from the side when every other automaker had moved on to dummies. And it was horrible. And we took over, we'd go to the auto shows, and there would be revolving multi-million-dollar prototype cars spinning around that people would watch. We would jump onto the platform, handcuff ourselves to the steering wheel, and put General Murderers sign in the windshield and give leaflets out to everybody. And yeah, I'm sure we ruined somebody's day at the auto show, but is that really? So I think, yeah, again, it's like inconveniences, but like I said to the earlier question, I think that we really don't go far enough. I would like to see us, be able to do more. There's some limitations now, of course, with the Patriot Act, that they're going after any pressure group and trying to declare them terrorist organizations. And so it's a different world now. So that's one of the reasons why we're a little bit more flamboyant in the trivial, silly sense than we are in the outrageous activist sense.
Michael Clear.
Thanks for coming today. We recently watched an interview in which you had to deal with a hostile and rather ignorant interviewer. I was wondering if you could share with us how you prepare for such an experience, and if you're ever hesitant to approach hostile situations, or if you consider all publicity to be good publicity. And as an addendum to that, if a mosquito were biting your arm, would you squash it?
Yes, I would. Well, I actually prefer the hostile interviews, and maybe just because of the way I grew up and the whole experience with the adversity I got for being a punk and gay and all these things, I almost have become, I just expect it every day now. And for so many years when I was growing up, I had it every day that I've almost become very comfortable with it. And if I walk into an interview or a situation where people are being really nice and heaping praise, I become really uncomfortable. But with the show that you're talking about, and when it's with interviews, I had Dateline following me around for a month once, and the reporter there also was pretty antagonistic. I understand where they're coming from. If I was just out there in the world watching some of the things we do, I'd probably have some of the same questions. So I really appreciate when they bring up those devil's advocate questions, because it means that that represents a whole lot of people. And when you can address that publicly or on a TV show, it satisfies those questions for so many people. Also, if somebody's being a bit of a tyrant, it makes the audience sympathize with you, even if they don't sympathize with your issues. So I much prefer a hostile interview. And as to preparing, I don't really ever prepare for shows anymore. If it's on a specific topic or a case, I'll study up on that. But if it's a general interview about animal rights, I take the bus, take the train, fly, and I answer all people equally. And so if it's a guy sitting with you on the set of National Geographic or something else, to me that's just the same as some guy sitting next to you at the bus stop, and they're going to ask similar questions, and I'll answer them all the same, and I just sort of become unaware of the fact that there may be millions of people tuned in, and just really try to deal with the question on a personal basis. And I think that works a lot more. There's certainly lots of facts and figures, but most people forget those. They, I think it's always really important to paint a gruesome picture of what's going on, but also to show that, we have a light side and we'll stand up for our convictions.
Wanted to ask a question myself. You've been very connected with the culture of celebrity and fame in our society, and you're friends with people like Paul McCartney of the Beatles. How do you feel that being involved? We play a lot of Beatles music here. That being involved in the culture of celebrity has changed you. Do you sense that one can almost be seduced into that it becomes so exciting to be invited to Hollywood openings, and so that one.
Well, it's interesting. I should tell two really simple stories about how that sort of happened. The Go-Go's, one of the bands that I grew up with, they used to all be these great fat skinhead chicks before they became big pop stars. And I was friends with them from the beginning. And Belinda Carlisle, when she had a big solo career in the late 80s, she called and said that she had been invited to play this Cheyenne Frontier Days festival in Wyoming, and she found out that it was a big rodeo festival, and she was offered $30,000 to play there. And I said, well, you really shouldn't do it, but you should write a letter telling them why. So she did, gave me a copy of the letter. I mentioned it to a friend of mine at the New York Daily News, and I was probably 22 or something at the time, and it became this huge sensation. Belinda says no to rodeo. Every celebrity page around the country printed her letter, which had facts about how they torment animals in the rodeo, how the bucking strap basically pinches their balls, and when they kick, they're trying to kick that strap away. So the whole supposed sport is just animal torture. And just because it was Belinda who wrote the letter, the whole country was talking, and I was really blindsided by the whole thing. So I thought, Christ, we got to get more of these letters. Not too long after that, Harry Connick Jr. It was announced that he would ride the elephant from into Manhattan to promote Ringling's launch in New York, and I thought, well, let's see if it works on the other way too. So we wrote a letter to Harry Connick Jr. saying, obviously you're unaware of how elephants are shackled and beaten and forced to perform in the circus. You really shouldn't go on this ride. If you do, we're going to have a protest. So we thought, well, let's see if, even though we're not really working with them, let's see if this works. The New York Post ran a big story, and it got picked up all over the place. Harry canceled his appearance. And I just thought, Christ, that was a hell of a lot easier than organizing some protest with 100 people. So we just went on. And so it's silly, but the world has become like a giant high school where people gossip about the popular people, and they want to know who's marrying who. So we've just sort of tapped into that. And now we just do it constantly, and we've worked with such great people. With Paul McCartney, when we were still on the Gillette campaign, I was visiting him once in England, and we were talking about the whole thing, and I said part of the campaign involved people sending back their razor or shaving cream, demanding a refund, and because they learned about how rabbits were blinded for things like liquid paper and shaving cream. He said, well, I'm sure I have some shaving gear upstairs, but that's from Gillette. Why don't we get mine and send it back, and we'll write. So we wrote a letter, sent it back. Next thing you know, People magazine, and everybody else wanted to send in their razor just like Paul McCartney did. So it's just, and now it's just it's almost formulaic, but it's still a great thing. Pink, who's a big PETA supporter, was invited by Prince William to play at his 21st birthday party, and she mentioned it, and I knew that Prince William was a big hunter, so she wrote a letter to him saying, no chance. I'll play your 22nd birthday if you stop hunting, but no way while you're a hunter. And of course, because the girly spoon at the world's most eligible bachelor, everybody really took notice when Pink said why she wouldn't do it, and it got the whole hunting issue redefined as a youth thing. It doesn't always have to be with celebrities that you work with. This is the Boston Herald from yesterday. People are obsessed with lists, and like I talked about, we always try to keep our finger on the pulse of what the media is paying a lot of attention to so that we can make sure animal issues are very visible. We came up a few years ago with doing the worst dress list, and we would keep a lookout for the skankiest fur wearers and keep a little list. And then every winter we'd release a list with really biting commentary about the person, and we just post it on our website. There's no production involved, there's no leaflets, there's no flyers, but we try to make the text so that it lets people know why fur is bad. And as soon as Martha wore that chinchilla scarf, we knew that she would be the #1. So we actually have her and Diana Ross topping celebrity convicts topping our worst dress list. And to show you how we were able to get the information about what happens to animals out, with Martha's we said, Martha won't get the electric chair, but the same can't be said for the chinchillas who were genitally electrocuted just so she could wear a frumpy scarf on the day of her conviction. Newspapers around the country and around the world, and even TV stations are now, and people are thinking, they genitally electrocute chinchillas, yeah, by the dozens, even more than 100, for one coat. I can't really read it, but it's similar. What do we say about Kobe Bryant? He never met a beaver he didn't want to take advantage of. So there's all sorts of things, and it's just you don't always have to use sex. Sometimes you can just be funny or be bitter or cynical, and they always go for it. We also have other types of lists that we do: the sexiest vegetarian, the most animal-friendly cities, most animal-friendly ballparks where you can get veggie dogs and things like that. So we do things that target celebrities just as much, if not more, as we do things that are with the participation of celebrities. And it's a celebrity-obsessed world. It's helped keep the issue so current that it's been wonderful. So, but again, it goes both ways.
Before we open to spontaneous questions, just a couple announcements. Dan Matthews has agreed to stay with us to continue the discussion with a smaller group from 4 to about 4:45. So those who are able to stay, please do so. And then all of you are invited to our weekly course dinner, which as usual is tonight at 6 in Leverett House, and we will enjoy Leverett's vegan cuisine, and Dan Matthews will be with us at that dinner tonight at 6, Leverett House private dining room. We'll open now to spontaneous questions.
Hi, Dan Matthews. Thanks for coming. I have in front of me a couple of ads from your website. And I don't know, would it be possible to maybe put them up there? Because it might show my point a little bit better. I think that those ones are fairly clearly pornographic.
Okay.
Yeah.
This one, actually, it's a fold-open leaflet, the real one. And it looks, when it's closed, it looks like a fur collar on something. And it says fur trim, and then you open it up, and it says unattractive. It's basically a joke about shaving.
Okay.
I don't see any sex involved, but...
Sorry, could you just pull up the other one there? It's got some fairly clear images as well.
Turn your back on fur, and it says objectifying women. There are actually more men in this ad than women. And I don't think they're having sex, but no, they're not having sex. They're just naked. This is, I'd rather show my buns than wear fur. Charlotte Ross from NYPD Blue. She's holding a rabbit. I think she looks great. She's a 32-year-old woman who works it, has a lot of fun. She's a very intelligent actress. She plays a very serious character in the show. She decided to use this part of her attribute to get attention on fur, and we thought, great. This is Gina Lee Nolan, who looks like she's wearing a turtleneck, and instead she's wearing body paint to make her look like a snake, and it's the slogan is, exotic skins belong in the jungle, not in your closet. I don't see any, I don't even see any body parts. It's all covered by paint. This is also Patricia Mantarola, a big Latin star. Exotic animals don't belong behind bars. And this is Dominique Swain. This one is a little bit racy. She's painting in front of the chalkboard. I'd rather go naked than wear fur, lots of times. The play on that was everybody has this nightmare that they find themselves nude in front of their class. So we did a play on that for this one for her. I don't think the nightmare is that they're having sex in front of their class. It's just that they're naked in front of their class.
Okay, but you could see how someone could potentially be offended by these ads objectifying women, right? And if indeed people could potentially be offended by this, wouldn't you rather align yourselves with a group such as, say the activist feminist movement or something like that would be more likely to actually agree with your cause rather than aligning more with fashion magazines and
Most feminists agree with us. There's a great thing in Bitch magazine last month about the whole naked campaign. There's so many great magazines now. There's a feminist one called Bitch. There's the New Jew Review, which is called Heb, which is hilarious. It's a great magazine. But no, I don't find these at all. And like I said, I'm gay. I think they're interesting. I think women are beautiful. Women think women are beautiful. If you look at all the women's magazines that they buy, it's women on the cover, not men. Women are just a little bit more fascinating to people in general. That's why we have so many of them in our ads. But we also have men in our ads. They don't get as much attention, but there's always naked men in our ads and in our protests. And so if you get off on that, great. If you don't get off on it, well, maybe there's a way that you can look at a human without just thinking of it as a sex object.
Open to more.
Yeah, we've got a few. I mean, I know they're selecting only certain images for this, but like I said, there's men in that one. We've done men in all these campaigns. We've used fat people. We've used old people. We've used lesbian couples. We've used gays. The whole gamut. And we've always been embraced by most feminist groups for having such a wide variety of people in our ads. Vanessa Olivares, I don't know if you ever watched American Idol. She was one of the contestants last year. I've never watched the show, but Simon told her, you know, you have a good voice, but you need to lose some weight. And she was dumped. And it was a huge fear for days on end about, was she really overweight? Is she really that? And we thought, she's not too overweight for us. Let's ask if she'll do one of our ads. So she did it, and the slogan of that ad was, be comfortable in your own skin. Don't wear fur. But also had the inclusion of, if you're a little overweight, so what? Who the hell cares? So we've always been inclusive with all of those things. I think your point would be right on target if we were only showing Baywatch babes, and that's it. But that's never been the case, although we have had those in too.
Hello. Agricultural tariffs in the United States and other parts of the first world.
I'm sorry?
Agricultural tariffs in the United States and other parts of the first world benefit large agro-businesses and industrial meat farmers. And these same tariffs also help to perpetuate human suffering in the third world. And so I was wondering if PETA was against these tariffs and could essentially kill two birds with one stone.
Who are you talking about exactly? The agribusiness?
I'm talking about industrial meat farmers in the United States that benefit from agricultural subsidies and tariffs.
It's an absolute scandal what's happened to American agriculture, and it's a scandal about what happens to the animals because they are mutilated and their teeth are ground down, their tails are cut off so that they don't mutilate each other. It's a shame that small farms have been bought up by big agribusiness and been put out of business. The environment, you know, the Chesapeake Bay and most other bays, but the Chesapeake Bay in particular, everybody's going on about what a shame its degradation is because it used to look like the tropics. But all of the chicken shit is so full of chemicals that it's choked off the oxygen and phosphorus and all the other chemicals that are in chicken waste has totally ruined the Chesapeake Bay. So there's a lot of different reasons to go vegetarian and to go vegan. Environment is a big one of them. And these, like I say, these agribusiness people, we're after them all the time. We were able to get McDonald's to stop buying meat from slaughterhouses that fail inspection by distributing a thing that we called the unhappy meal that we give to kids, and it had mutilated animals inside and little games you could play that connect the dots and things that illustrated the horrible things that were happening to animals. And kids are busy playing video games where they're shooting drivers and stuff like that. This is really nothing. It's just a real violence that they can voice their dissent for, and that actually worked, and McDonald's stopped. Today we launched, and it's just hit the national wires today. We're targeting Kentucky Fried Chicken, and we're giving out a thing called the bucket of blood to kids outside of KFC's that talks about how they live scald birds to defeather them and rip their beaks off when they're babies because they go so insane from confinement that they peck each other to death. So yeah, going to kids is another great thing, I think. It's very important.
Yep.
Hi, thanks for coming. My question is sort of an ethical one. As a pre-vet student and a lifelong animal lover and pet owner, I often think long and seriously about animal rights and was deeply affected after reading Peter Singer's Animal Liberation last summer. I'm sure you've thought about the merits of owning animals as pets, and I was wondering how you came to differentiate between this essential use of animals for human pleasure with your obvious beliefs in the animal's rights to live a happy, unconfined life, and with your views on the breeding industry. How do I reconcile my love for animals as companions with my love for animals as animals?
Well, that's a very good question. I don't have any animals because I travel too much. I had loads of cats growing up that we took in all the strays from the neighborhood. I think having an animal is like having a child, and unless you're willing to make that lifetime commitment and proper care, then you shouldn't have animals. I have no problem with shelters that put animals down. I think more animals should be put down because there's lots of them that are in homes where they're left cooped up all day. They have no life. People leave them in a tiny cage when they leave the house because they don't want the couch ripped up. There's people that move away and leave their animals starving inside the apartment. There's, for every wonderful home that has a great situation for an animal, there are many more that any local humane organization will tell you that have hideous homes for animals. So I'm not crazy about the idea of people having companion animals at home. I'm always nervous about it because I always hear so many horror stories. Having said that, there's a lot of people out there that make great companions for their animals and do look at it as a more, they don't look at the animal as, we don't even use the word pet because it sort of reinforces the whole idea of something that's there to please you when you feel like it. But instead, use the term companion animals. So yeah, it's like having a child is just what I would tell anybody. And I'll certainly never have children either. So.
Before thanking our guests, let me just remind you we will continue the discussion right after 4 for those who can stay. Dan Matthews for helping us.
Thanks to everybody, and please, for all the crazy things we do a lot of great other things that you never hear about, like constructing dog houses for people that live in poor areas whose animals are chained outside with no shelter. Visit PETA.org and take a look at all the other things we do to get a fuller idea of all of the things that we're involved in. And thanks a lot for having me.
That was great.
That was all right.